The dawn over Fairview came heavy with silence, a silence too thick to be natural, too still to be innocent. The sky had a copper tint, and the fields of cotton stretched like pale ghosts in the dim light, their tufts bending under dew. From the porch of the Fairview Manor, the overseer usually rang the morning bell by now, but this morning the bell lay broken beside the door, half buried in dust. Down the hill, near the edge of the cotton field, a figure stood motionless barefoot, shoulders squared, face calm but hardened by what the night had revealed. Isaac, the main slave of Fairview, held his hat in one trembling hand. Behind him, the smoke from the old gin house drifted slow and lazy, carrying the sour stench of char and ruin. Fairview Plantation had burned something last night, something more than wood, more than crops, and in that ash, something inside Isaac had shifted forever. The voices of the past echoed through the charred wind. The fields where he had once heard laughter, the giggles of two small girls chasing butterflies between rows of cotton, were now empty. His daughters, Ella and Elara, the twin girls the master once called mirror curses, were somewhere behind him near the slave quarters, clutching each other's hands, silent, frightened. They were only 9 years old, yet they had already learned how to hold pain like grown women. Isaac's eyes lifted toward the horizon where the manor stood like a white tomb. Its columns glowed pink in the rising sun, proud and cruel, as if untouched by the night's blaze. But he knew the truth, the fire hadn't reached it yet. It would. The morning wind carried the faint, choking cough of Master Fairview, the man who owned Isaac, who had buried his wife behind that house and turned her grave into a patch of ornamental flowers. The man who had ordered lashes on Isaac's back for teaching his girls to read. The same man whose hands trembled now watching the smoke curl from his cotton store. Inside the slave quarters, shadows stirred. Women whispered. Children cried quietly. Men stood still with eyes that burned more fiercely than the fire outside. No one dared to move toward the master's house yet. There was a balance in the air, fragile, like glass before it shatters. Isaac turned as Miriam, an older woman with streaks of grey in her braids, stepped up beside him. "You did this, didn't you?" she said softly, her eyes fixed on the rising smoke. Isaac didn't answer. $50,000 worth of cotton, she murmured, almost to herself. "Lord help us. You done started the end." He looked down at his calloused hands, still blackened with soot. "The end been started long before me," he said, voice low, steady. "I just gave it a face." Behind them, Elara's small hand tugged on her sister's sleeve. "Pa?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "They gonna hurt you again?" Isaac knelt and looked her in the eyes. Elara was the darker of the twins, with eyes like deep molasses and curls that caught the morning light. Ella stood beside her, slightly taller, lighter-skinned, her expression tense with understanding. "They already done all they could," Isaac said softly. "Ain't nothing left to take from me." He touched both their cheeks. "But what's mine stays mine today. You hear me?" Ella nodded slowly. Elara bit her lip, eyes glistening. "What about the others?" she whispered. Isaac looked past them at the slave cabins, the smoke, the trembling world. "They'll follow when the time comes. But this part's mine to do." A horse's cry broke through the morning. At the top of the hill, the manor door burst open. Master Fairview stepped out, pale, furious, half-dressed, his fine vest undone. The overseer, Tom Briggs, followed behind, clutching his rifle. "Who set the fire?" the master shouted, voice cracking. "Who?" No one answered. The silence of the slaves was louder than any confession. Tom spat and raised the rifle toward the cabins. "I'll drag the truth out of one of y'all," he snarled. But Isaac stepped forward before the words could hang in the air too long. His movements were slow, deliberate, like a man who had already made peace with death. He walked through the rows of charred cotton, boots crunching on ashes head high. The twins stood frozen, watching their father move toward the man who had owned his name, his blood, his daughters. "Was me," Isaac said finally, standing before the master. His voice carried like thunder, rolling low across the field. "I burned it." Fairview's eyes widened. "You?" His lips twitched, as though he couldn't decide whether to laugh or shoot. "You burned my cotton?" Isaac nodded once. Tom Briggs cocked the rifle, but Fairview raised his hand. "No. Let him speak." He stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "You think you hurt me by this? You think fire can touch me? I own this land. I'll plant it again, you ignorant mule." Isaac's jaw tightened. "You can plant all you want," he said, calm but fierce, "but you can't grow something that already died." A hush fell. The overseer looked uneasy. The other slaves had gathered in silence behind the cabins, their faces unreadable. The morning sun rose higher, touching the blackened fields, making the smoke shimmer like ghosts rising. Fairview's voice broke through the quiet. "You'll hang for this," he hissed, "before sundown." Isaac met his gaze, unblinking. "Then I reckon I'll finally see what freedom feels like." For a moment no one moved. Then a crack split the air, not from a gun, but from the old cotton press collapsing under its own burnt weight. The sound echoed like a warning bell. Fairview flinched. The smoke thickened. Somewhere behind Isaac, Elara began to cry softly, muffled by her sister's hand. The master looked toward the twins, those two, small reflections of the woman he had once taken by force, the girls he had never acknowledged. Something flickered across his face, shame maybe, or fear, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "Take him," he said coldly to the overseer. Tom raised the rifle again, stepping closer. Isaac didn't move. He turned his head slightly, enough to see the twins one last time. "Don't cry," he said gently. "Today's just the start." Then he lifted his chin, staring back at the master of Fairview, as the flames behind him painted the sky orange. The wind shifted. Smoke rolled across the field, swallowing the manor's white walls. The day had only begun, but the world of Fairview was already ending. The sun climbed higher, pressing its heat down over Fairview like punishment from above. By noon, the smoke from the cotton field had thinned into grey wisps drifting over the house, but the stench of burned wealth lingered. Every white man on the property could smell ruin in the air, and every slave could taste the shift of power that came with it. They dragged Isaac to the clearing beside the old oak, the same one where the first slave of Fairview had been hung half a century ago. The ground was dry there, baked hard by summers of blood and fear. The oak's branches stretched wide, its shadow falling across Isaac's shoulders like a ghost hand. Tom Briggs, the overseer, was sweating through his shirt. He'd tied Isaac's hands behind his back, looped a coarse rope around his neck, and now pulled it tight enough to dig into the skin but not enough to end it yet. His face was red from the sun and from the anger boiling beneath his breath. "Burn in the master's cotton," he muttered, half to himself. "Ain't no punishment too hard for a man that stupid." Isaac stood still. His shirt, once rough grey linen, was torn from the scuffle, his chest streaked with soot and sweat. He said nothing, not even when Tom shoved him against the tree. He just looked out toward the field, where the ashes of $50,000 worth of cotton still smoked, as if the land itself was whispering thank you. A few yards away, Master Fairview sat in a chair brought from the porch, his vest freshly buttoned now, his cane resting across his knees. His face was calm again, too calm. The rage that had shaken him earlier had cooled into something far worse, pride wounded deep enough to be dangerous. He glanced toward the gathered slaves, men, women, children forced to watch. None dared look him directly in the eyes. The twins, Ella and Elara, stood near the back, clutching Miriam's skirt. The older woman kept her arms around them, whispering something neither child could quite hear. Fairview's voice cut through the thick air. "You all see this man," he said loudly, gesturing toward Isaac. "You see what happens when you forget your place?" He thought fire could make him free. He leaned forward slightly, eyes narrowing. "But fire only burns what's already gone. It can't touch what belongs to me." Tom yanked the rope tighter, making Isaac stumble. The rough fibers scraped his throat. A ripple of fear moved through the crowd, but Isaac's expression didn't change. He raised his head again, jaw locked, gaze fixed not on the master, but on the two small figures trembling in the back. Fairview noticed and smiled faintly. "Ah, your girls." His tone was soft now, almost mocking. "They should learn early what disobedience costs." He looked at Tom. "Make it slow." Tom grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. With pleasure. He looped the rope over the thick branch and tightened it, tying a knot that creaked as he pulled. The sound was enough to make Elara whimper and hide her face against Miriam's dress. Ella, though shaking, refused to look away. Her small hands clenched into fists. Isaac saw that. Even through the haze of heat and dust, he saw the steel forming in his daughter's eyes, the same look his own wife had carried years ago, before she was gone. It was enough to keep him standing when every muscle in his body screamed to fall. Tom stepped back and wiped his forehead. "Ready when you are, sir." Fairview nodded slowly, but before giving the signal, he rose from his chair and walked closer to Isaac. His polished boots crushed the dry grass. "You think you've won something, don't you?" he said quietly. "You think setting fire to my field makes you a man?" Isaac's voice was hoarse but steady. "No, sir. It make me human. Fairview's jaw flexed. The air between them went still, save for the creak of the rope in the wind. Then, suddenly, he swung his cane and struck Isaac hard across the face. The sound cracked like thunder. Blood traced down Isaac's cheek, but he didn't fall. "You'll hang for your pride," Fairview said, his voice trembling now, "and your daughters will remember you as a fool who threw away his life for nothing." Isaac spat blood onto the dirt. "They'll remember I ain't bowed." For a moment, Fairview's eyes flickered rage and something close to fear mingling behind them. He turned sharply. "Do it." Tom stepped forward, hand gripping the loose end of the rope. The crowd flinched as he began to pull. The rope tightened. Isaac's body jerked, legs straining for ground that no longer held him. A deep, guttural sound tore from his throat. The twins screamed. "Stop!" Ella's voice cut through the air. She broke free from Miriam's grasp, running forward, her small feet pounding the dirt. "Stop it, please!" Tom hesitated. Even he wasn't immune to the sight of a child crying for her father, but Fairview's glare froze him. "Finish it!" the master snapped. And then suddenly the branch above them creaked and snapped. The rope gave way. Isaac crashed to the ground, coughing violently, air rushing back into his lungs like water after drowning. The crowd gasped. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Even Fairview stared at the broken branch as if heaven itself had interfered. Tom cursed and bent down to retie the rope, but Fairview raised a hand. "No," he said, voice low, dangerous. "Let him breathe. He'll hang again before sundown." He turned to his men. "Lock him in the shed. I'll deal with him after the Reverend arrives." Two white men stepped forward, grabbing Isaac by the arms. He staggered to his feet, his neck raw and burning, but his eyes held fire no rope could kill. As they dragged him away, he glanced back toward his daughters. Ella stood trembling, her face streaked with tears and ash. Ilara hid behind her, clutching her sister's arm. Isaac met their gaze, one last silent message passing between them. "Don't break." Miriam pulled the twins close as Fairview's men shoved Isaac toward the storage shed by the barn. The door slammed shut behind him, iron latch clicking into place. The sound was final, heavy as judgment. Fairview turned to the gathered slaves. "You will all go back to work," he ordered coldly. "Before I decide, the next fire should come from your cabins." His voice carried across the clearing like poison. "And somebody clean this mess. I won't have my yard look like a gallows." He walked back toward the house, his cane tapping in rhythm with his steps. Behind him, the wind shifted again, carrying the faint smell of burned cotton and blood. Miriam looked toward the shed, then to the girls. "Come," she whispered. "Ain't safe out here." But Ella shook her head, eyes still on the locked door. "He ain't done yet," she said quietly, voice shaking but certain. "Pa ain't done." And somewhere inside that dark, suffocating shed, Isaac's shallow breathing steadied. The rope burn throbbed against his skin, but his mind was clear. The fire had only just begun, and Fairview's reckoning would come before nightfall. Inside, the storage shed, the air was thick with dust and heat. The light that slipped through the cracks in the boards cut into the darkness in thin, trembling lines. Isaac sat against the wall, wrists still bound, his throat raw from the rope. Every breath burned. The faint smell of pitch and charred cotton clung to his skin. He could hear them outside boots crunching on dirt, men's voices carrying orders, the rattle of tools as Fairview's workers tried to rebuild what was lost. The fire had eaten through the cotton stores, the main gin, and half the western field. Fairview's wealth had gone up in smoke in a single night, and though the fire was out, the plantation's soul was still burning. Isaac leaned his head back and closed his eyes. He could almost hear the fire again, crackling in the dark. He remembered the moment he'd lit it, the flick of flint, the tiny bloom of flame, and how it spread like judgment. He'd stood there watching it devour the cotton, the night sky glowing red. For the first time in years, he'd felt his own heart beating in rhythm with something greater than pain. The door creaked open suddenly, and a shaft of white sunlight cut through the gloom. Miriam slipped inside, holding a small tin cup of water. Her face was pale with fear. "Boy, what you done?" she whispered, setting the cup down beside him. "They mean to kill you, sure as the Lord breathes." Isaac managed a faint smile. "Ain't that what they've been trying since the day I was born?" She gave him a sharp look, eyes glistening. "Don't talk that way. You got them girls to think of." His smile faded. "I ain't forgot." He drank slowly, the water trickling down his parched throat like mercy. "They all right?" Miriam nodded. "Shook up bad, but they strong. Ella got your fire, that one. Ilara don't stop asking when you coming home." Isaac swallowed hard. then whispered, "Tell her, I'm coming before the sun sleep." Miriam's eyes widened. "Don't you go talking foolish." "I ain't." He looked up at her, voice low but certain. "This house burned once. It's gonna burn again. But this time, the right thing gonna turn to ash." Miriam stepped back, shaking her head. "You planning something, I can see it. You best let it rest. They'll kill you, and them girls be left alone in this hell." Isaac's gaze hardened. "They already in hell. Only difference is tonight I decide who burns." Before Miriam could answer, footsteps approached outside. She slipped out the back door, vanishing into the glare just as Tom Briggs appeared. He kicked the door open, rifle slung over his shoulder. "Get up," he said curtly. "The master wants you on your knees when the Reverend gets here. Gonna make a proper spectacle out of you before he hangs you right this time." Isaac didn't move. "He can't hang me twice." Tom grabbed his arm and hauled him up. "You'll find out he can." They dragged him back toward the main yard. The sky was a bruised blue, the sun hanging high and merciless. The smell of sweat, smoke, and blood mixed in the air. Every slave on the property had been forced to stand in the clearing again. The twins clung to Miriam's skirt, their faces streaked with dirt and fear. Fairview stood near the veranda, speaking with a tall, thin man in a black coat, the Reverend, come to bless the execution. His Bible hung heavy in one hand, as if the weight of God's word had long turned into something else. When they brought Isaac forward, the Reverend turned and studied him with cold detachment. "You brought this upon yourself," he said softly. "Rebellion is the devil's whisper." Isaac stared at him. Then maybe the devil the only one listening. Fairview's eyes narrowed. "Enough. Tie him back to the post. We'll do this proper." Tom shoved Isaac down near the same oak, the broken branch still hanging like a curse, above. As he knelt, Isaac caught sight of Ella. She stood still, trembling, but her eyes locked with his. Something in her face stopped him from despair. She was watching, learning, remembering. Every blow that fell on him would live in her blood like fire waiting for air. Fairview motioned to one of his men. "Bring the whip." Isaac clenched his teeth as the man uncoiled the thick leather strap. The sound of it slicing through the air made even the birds fall silent. Fairview stepped forward, his voice calm, almost tender. "I built this land from nothing, Isaac, from dirt and blood. You think I'll let a slave take that from me?" Isaac's voice came back hoarse. "You ain't built it. We did. You just claimed it." Fairview struck him hard across the back with the cane again, not the whip, not yet. "You'll learn to hold your tongue." The first crack of the whip followed a heartbeat later. It tore through the air, through flesh, through memory. Isaac didn't scream, the crowd did. Each strike echoed like thunder rolling over Fairview's fields. 10 lashes. 15. The Reverend muttered a prayer between each one. By the 20th, the ground beneath Isaac was slick with blood, and his knees trembled. He still hadn't fallen. Fairview wiped the sweat from his brow and leaned close. "You'll beg before this day is done," he whispered. Isaac looked up, eyes glazed with pain but unbroken. "You already begging, master," he rasped. "You just too proud to know it." Fairview's face twisted. He lifted the whip himself now, driving it down again and again, until even Tom Briggs looked away. Finally, Isaac collapsed to one knee. The Reverend stepped forward, muttering something about mercy, but Fairview silenced him with a glare. "There's no mercy for fire," he said. "Only ashes." And yet at that moment, the wind changed again, hard and sudden, blowing through the burned field and across the yard. Ash swirled through the air like snow. The overseer looked up uneasily as the smoke from the old gin house rose again, thicker this time. Miriam's voice trembled. "Lord, save us, it's burning again." Fairview turned sharply, eyes wide. Beyond the field, new flames licked the dry cotton that had survived the first blaze. The fire spread quick, carried by the wind, racing toward the manor. "Get the buckets," he shouted. Men scrambled, panic breaking their perfect order. In the chaos, Tom dropped the rope that held Isaac. The twins screamed as the firelight reflected in their eyes. Isaac's head lifted slowly. Through blood and pain, a strange calm spread over him. He could hear the crackle again, the sound of freedom dressed in flame. Fairview barked orders, but the fire had already reached the cotton wagons. The explosion of burning oil sent men running for their lives. The Reverend fled toward his carriage. Smoke rolled through the yard, swallowing everything in a grey shroud. Tom turned to Isaac, rifle raised, but Isaac moved faster. He lunged, slamming his shoulder into Tom's gut, sending the man sprawling. The rifle fired into the sky. Isaac snatched it before it hit the ground and swung it like a club, cracking it against Tom's jaw. The overseer dropped, unmoving. Fairview spun around, eyes wild. "You—" Isaac stood, blood-soaked and shaking, the rifle in his hands. "Ain't no master left here," he said quietly. Behind him, the manor's roof caught fire. The sky turned orange. Fairview's voice broke for the first time. "You'll burn us all." Isaac looked up at the fire spreading behind him and whispered, "That's the point." And somewhere in that roar of wind and flame, the line between slave and man vanished, leaving only the reckoning Fairview had long feared. The flames took the sky before anyone realized how fast the wind had turned. Smoke poured from the roof of the manor, climbing into the blue like a black banner. The white columns of Fairview, once the pride of the county, now glowed red as heat licked their paint. Glass cracked, shutters warped, and the air filled with the smell of burning oak and panic. Isaac staggered across the yard, his body torn but alive. He moved like a man following something older than pain. The rifle he'd taken from Tom Briggs hung in his grip, heavy with purpose. Behind him, the twins screamed his name through the smoke. Miriam held them back, shielding their faces from sparks that fell like ash snow. Fairview stood on the veranda, shouting orders at men who were no longer listening. They ran in circles with buckets, hurling water that hissed uselessly against the heat. The fire had grown too strong, fed by the oil barrels stacked near the barn. Every gust carried sparks across the yard, setting the dry cotton sacks ablaze. The wealth of Fairview was burning faster than any bullet could destroy it. "Get the horses," Fairview roared. "Save the ledgers. The silver, save something." No one moved toward the house. The doorway glowed like the mouth of hell. Fairview turned and saw Isaac walking toward him through the smoke. His steps were slow, deliberate. For the first time in his life, the master backed away. "Stay where you are," Fairview said, lifting his cane as though it were a weapon. Isaac didn't stop. The rifle hung at his side. Each step brought him closer until the heat shimmered between them. "You could have let it be," Fairview hissed. "I would have given you mercy, given your girls a place inside." Isaac's voice came rough but even. "You don't get to speak on mercy." He raised the rifle not to fire, but to point toward the burning house. "Look at it. That's what your mercy built." A beam inside the parlor cracked and collapsed with a roar. The front windows exploded outward, spraying shards across the porch. Fairview flinched, shielding his face. When he looked back, Isaac was only a few paces away. From behind the smoke came a shrill cry, Ilara's voice. "Pa, don't!" Isaac turned just long enough to see her small face streaked with soot. The sight steadied him. "I ain't running, baby," he called. "Just setting things right." Fairview lunged, swinging his cane. Isaac caught it mid-air, wrenched it free, and snapped it across his knee. The master stumbled backward onto the steps, coughing. The heat rolled over them, fierce enough to blister skin. "You can kill me," Fairview rasped, eyes wild, "but you'll still die a slave." Isaac shook his head. "I already died once. This here's just the breath after." He pressed the rifle barrel to the ground and used it to keep himself standing as another explosion thundered from the barn. Horses screamed, breaking loose from their stalls. Men scattered. The entire yard became chaos. Inside the manor, curtains ignited, spreading light through the windows like blood behind glass. Fairview turned toward the door, panic breaking through his pride. "My wife's portrait, my records." He tried to rush inside, but the heat forced him back. He looked to Isaac in desperation. "Help me, damn you! Help me save it!" Isaac stared at him, sweat and soot running down his face. "Can't save what never was holy." Fairview grabbed his collar. "You think your children will live free after this? You think anyone will let them walk away?" Isaac's answer was quiet. "They'll walk through fire if they have to." He shoved Fairview off him. The master stumbled down the steps, landing hard in the dirt. The rifle clattered between them. Both men looked at it, the line between power and powerlessness lying in the ash. Fairview reached first, fingers brushing the stock. Isaac kicked it away, then drove his fist into the master's jaw. The man fell back, blood blooming across his lip. Isaac didn't strike again. He simply turned and looked toward the twins. "Go with Miriam," he shouted. "Take the creek path. Don't stop till you see the old sycamore." Ella pulled her sister, but Ilara resisted, tears streaming. "I can't leave you." "You will," he said. "That's how you remember me." Miriam grabbed them both and started toward the trees. The flames behind painted them in orange silhouettes. Fairview saw them running and screamed to his men, "Stop them, they're mine!" But no one obeyed. Half the overseers were gone. The others were trying to keep the stables from exploding. Fairview lunged for the fallen rifle again. Isaac kicked it up with his foot and caught it mid-air. "Mine now," he said. The words were calm but final. Fairview froze. The firelight danced in his eyes, reflecting twin circles of fear. He opened his mouth, maybe to beg, maybe to curse, but the manor behind him groaned, walls buckling inward. A storm of sparks rained down. Fairview turned instinctively, staring as his world collapsed. Isaac stepped back, lowering the rifle. He didn't need to fire. The house was already taking him. A flaming beam fell across the veranda, trapping the master between columns. He screamed, a sound swallowed by the roar of the blaze. Isaac watched, chest heaving, not with joy but with grim awe. For years he had dreamed of vengeance. Now it stood before him, dressed in fire and ruin. He whispered a prayer not of forgiveness but of ending. Let it all burn. He turned away and stumbled toward the path. The ground trembled as the roof collapsed behind him. The explosion of heat chased him halfway across the yard, knocking him to his knees. He crawled until the smoke thinned, until the only sounds were the crackling of what remained and the distant sobs of his daughters. When he reached them, they were waiting by the creek, trembling, faces streaked with ash. Ilara ran to him first, throwing her arms around his neck. Ella stood behind her, eyes wide and hollow. "Gone," Ilara whispered. "The house, it's all gone." Isaac held her tight. That's how it needed to be. From where they knelt, the glow of the burning manor lit the night sky. It looked almost beautiful, terrible, and holy at once. The twins leaned against their father's shoulders as embers drifted down like red stars. Behind them, distant shouts rose, men from neighboring farms coming to see the blaze. Isaac knew they'd follow the smoke, find the ruin, find him. There would be no running far. But he also knew something else. Fairview would never rise again. He looked at his daughters, small and fierce in the flickering light. "They'll come for us soon," he said quietly. "But till they do, we got the truth." Ella frowned. "What truth?" He brushed her cheek with a soot-stained hand. "That a man can choose his own ending. That's worth more than cotton." They sat together by the water's edge while the fire devoured the last of Fairview. Each pop and crash from the collapsing beams sounded like a drumbeat marking the death of the old world. Above them, the stars blinked through the smoke, steady and indifferent. When dawn finally came, the plantation was nothing but black ground and twisted iron. And for the first time, the air over Fairview carried no command, only silence. Morning broke pale and heavy, washing the fields in light that revealed only ruin. The great house of Fairview was now a skeleton, black ribs of timber, reaching out from piles of ash. Columns that once gleamed white were scorched to stumps. The air still carried the bitter tang of smoke and burnt cotton. A fortune turned to dust. By the creek, Isaac stirred from half-sleep. His body ached from smoke and strain, his skin blistered in patches. He had not closed his eyes all night, only drifted between pain and thought. The twins lay curled beneath his coat, still and silent. Miriam kept watch a few paces away, her hands clasped tight as if holding back the dawn itself. When Isaac rose, his first breath came with a rasp. He looked toward the horizon, where the faint lines of neighboring plantations stood alive, untouched, unaware or unwilling to help. He knew what would come next. Patrol riders would arrive by noon. Fairview's death would not go unpunished. He knelt beside his daughters. "Wake up, little fires," he murmured. Ilara blinked, eyes glassy, and sat up, rubbing soot from her cheeks. Ella followed, quieter, her gaze distant. They looked older than they had the day before, not in years, but in what they'd seen. "Pa," Ilara whispered, "is Master Fairview dead?" Isaac looked toward the horizon. "Ain't no man walks out of that heat." Ella's lip trembled. "Will they come for us now?" "They always come," he said softly, "but this time we won't bow." Miriam moved closer, clutching her shawl around her. "We can't stay here. Smoke's still rising, they'll follow it." "I know," Isaac replied. "We head south, cross the ridge. There's swampland down there too thick for riders." The group began to move. Each step took them past what once defined their lives, the burnt cotton rows, the skeletal barn, the broken wagon wheels. The fields were black, soft underfoot, reeking of ruin. In the wind, scraps of half-burned ledger pages fluttered. The ink melted into ghosts of numbers. Ilara paused and picked up a charred scrap. It still bore a faint list of names, the slave ledger, now unreadable but for the top line, "Property of Fairview Estate." She stared at it, then crushed it in her small fist. "Not any more," she said. Isaac looked down at her, pride stirring through exhaustion. "That's my girl." They reached the edge of the woods as the sun climbed higher. Birds began to return, cautious, their calls soft against the emptiness. Miriam stumbled once and Isaac steadied her. "You all right?" She nodded weakly. "Just feels wrong to be breathing when others ain't." Isaac didn't answer. He carried his silence like a wound. His mind wandered back to the night before the fire, Fairview's last scream, the house collapsing. He hadn't meant to become its destroyer. He only meant to stop the pain. But the world didn't care for meaning, only for consequence. By midday, the heat grew thick. They found shelter under a cluster of magnolia trees, their leaves wide enough to cast deep shade. Isaac told the girls to rest. Miriam washed their faces in the creek water and tore a strip from her skirt to bandage Isaac's arm. "You'll need more than cloth," she said. "That burn runs deep." He gave a faint smile. "I'll live long enough." From far off came the faint echo of hooves the sound carried on wind. Miriam froze. Isaac's eyes narrowed. "They're tracking the smoke." The twins clung to him. "What do we do?" Ella whispered. Isaac scanned the forest line. "Keep moving. Stay low." They moved deeper into the woods, their feet sinking into soft earth. Vines tangled at their legs, branches tore at their clothes. The hooves grew louder for a while, then faded. The patrol had taken the road instead of the creek. For now, they were ghosts. As they walked, Elara tugged at her father's sleeve. "Pa, when you burned it, were you scared?" Isaac glanced down at her. "Every breath was fear. But I learned something: fear don't stop fire. It feeds it. You light it anyway." She nodded solemnly, gripping his hand. "I'll remember that." By evening, they reached the ridge, a steep rise overlooking what had once been a sea of green fields. From here, they could see the column of smoke still rising from Fairview's ruins, twisting into the sky like a black memorial. Isaac stared at it in silence, the reflection of flame still alive in his eyes. Miriam stepped beside him. "What happens now?" He exhaled slowly. "They'll rebuild what they can. They'll curse my name in every church house from here to Savannah, but they'll never wear clean again, not in spirit." The twins sat on a fallen log nearby. Ella hummed softly a tune Grace used to sing at night when she thought no one was listening. It trembled through the trees like a ghost's lullaby. When she finished, Elara whispered, "Do you think Mama heard it?" Isaac smiled faintly. "She's the one carried it on the wind." The sun dropped low, painting the world in gold and ember. Shadows stretched long across the ridge. Isaac knew they couldn't go farther, not tonight. They built a small fire hidden behind rocks, enough for warmth but not smoke. The girls huddled close as darkness crept in. Miriam sat opposite Isaac, the firelight flickering between them. "You think we done right?" she asked quietly. He stared into the flames. "Right. Don't live here no more. Just what's left." A silence fell, broken only by the crackle of the small fire and the whisper of insects. The twins slept eventually, heads resting against each other. Miriam leaned back, exhaustion claiming her. Isaac remained awake, watching the stars appear through the tree canopy. His body hurt, but his heart felt strangely light, not with joy, but release. He whispered into the night, "Grace, I done what I could. If I don't make it, make sure they do." Somewhere distant, an owl called. Somewhere closer, the river murmured. And above, the smoke from Fairview thinned into the heavens, carrying the ashes of masters and men alike. Before dawn, he rose and scattered the embers of their small fire. He marked the twins' foreheads with the soot left on his fingers, two dark smudges, twin marks of survival. "When they see you," he said softly, "they'll know whose daughters you are." Elara stirred awake, touching the mark. "What's it for?" Isaac smiled faintly. "So no one forgets what we burned." The smoke of Fairview had thinned to a memory by the second day, but the echo of what happened still crawled through the countryside like wildfire through dry grass. Word spread faster than horses could ride. The slave burned the master alive, they said. The daughters ran. The woman helped. The story changed with each retelling, but the fury stayed the same. By sunrise, the first riders appeared, 5 men in grey dusters, rifles slung, eyes sharp with vengeance. They came from the neighboring estates, men who'd known Fairview, drunk his whiskey, gambled with him over cotton yields. They rode for his pride more than his death. Isaac heard them before he saw them. The sound of hooves came faint, then steady, then thunderous. He knelt by the creek, wetting a cloth, when the tremor of pursuit reached through the ground. Miriam met his eyes instantly. No words were needed. "Girls," she whispered urgently, "up now, move quiet." Elara and Ella rose, rubbing sleep from their faces. Isaac grabbed the small satchel of dried corn and led them deeper into the trees. The air was thick with morning mist. They moved low, barefoot, the damp earth soft underfoot. The riders reached the ridge soon after. One dismounted, touching the still warm ashes of the small fire they'd left behind. "They ain't far," he said. "Tracks lead south. Reckon the end was hurt," another said, spitting. "Can't run long." The leader, a broad man with a scar across his jaw, stared toward the swamp ahead. "Then he won't need to run. We'll smoke him out." Back among the trees, Isaac pressed his hand against Ilara's back, guiding her. His breath came ragged, not from fear but exhaustion. His arm was bandaged with rags that had gone brown overnight. Miriam kept glancing over her shoulder, eyes catching flashes of movement through the mist. "We can't keep running," she whispered. Isaac didn't answer. He pushed forward until the trees broke into the marshland, a vast stretch of waterlogged ground, reeds and cypress roots twisting like old bones. The smell of decay hung thick, but so did cover. "This way," he said. "Water'll hide our scent." They stepped into the shallows, the cold biting through their skin. Frogs croaked somewhere ahead. The twins clung to each other, skirts dragging heavy with mud. Each step sounded too loud, yet the forest swallowed it. Behind them a shot cracked sharp, echoing through the trees. Birds scattered upward. Ilara gasped. Isaac pulled her down, crouching behind a fallen trunk. Another shot followed, closer. "They're shooting to scare us out," Miriam whispered. Isaac shook his head. "No, they're marking range." The riders entered the marsh edge, voices growing louder. "Spread wide," one shouted. "We'll catch the bastard before dark." Isaac motioned to Miriam. "Take the girls east. Keep low till you hit dry land." Miriam gripped his arm. "You ain't coming?" He met her eyes calm, resolved. "They'll follow me. You got to get 'em clear." "No, Pa." Ilara's voice broke. She clutched his sleeve with both hands. "We can't leave you." He knelt, cupping her face. "You remember what I told you. You light it anyway. That's your fire now." He kissed both daughters' foreheads, leaving fresh smudges of ash beside the ones from before. Then he stood, shoulders squared, and stepped into the open marsh. His boots sank in muck, his silhouette rising dark against the pale fog. Miriam took the twins and vanished eastward through the reeds, her heart hammering. Isaac moved west toward the sound of hooves. He walked slow, deliberate, a man walking toward his ghosts. The riders spotted him through the mist. "There," one shouted. "By the cypress," rifles leveled. Isaac didn't run. The first bullet tore through a branch beside him, the second grazed his sleeve. He ducked behind a stump, fired once in return, a clean, controlled shot. The lead rider toppled from his horse with a scream. "Spread out," the scarred man barked. "He's cornered." Isaac moved deeper into the swamp, each step slower, heavier. Blood ran from his arm again. He knew he couldn't outrun them, but he could make them follow. He reached a patch of shallow water where roots coiled thick. He crouched low, loading his rifle with trembling hands. The forest hummed with tension. Then movement. A shadow to his left, another to his right. "Don't make it harder than it's got to be," called a voice. "Ain't no way out." Isaac smiled faintly. "Ain't that what your kind always said?" He fired again, one shot, then another. Both hit true. The swamp erupted in shouting. Bullets tore through the mist, splintering bark. Isaac ducked low, pressing his back against a root. The scarred leader advanced, face twisted with rage. "You'll pay for what you done." Isaac's voice came calm through the smoke. "Already did. Whole life long." The last bullet in his rifle clicked empty. He dropped it and stood tall, exposed. The leader aimed. For a heartbeat, the world went silent except for the whisper of the wind. Then a flash. The gunshot echoed. Isaac fell back into the water, ripples spreading slow. The riders approached, rifles ready. The leader kicked at the body, waiting for movement. Isaac didn't stir. The water around him darkened. "Check the others," the leader ordered. "Find the woman and brats." They scattered, unaware of Miriam, and the twins crouched beneath the thick roots barely 20 yards away, holding their breath. Ilara's tears streamed silently down her soot-streaked face, her hand clamped over her mouth. Ella clung to Miriam's arm, trembling so hard her teeth clicked. They waited until the riders left, their curses fading through the trees. Only when the silence returned did Miriam move. She crawled forward, dragging the twins with her, until they reached Isaac's body. He lay half submerged, face turned toward the sky, eyes open but peaceful. The morning light glinted off the still water, painting him in soft silver. Ilara knelt beside him, small hands shaking. "Pa, wake up," she whispered. "Please." Miriam knelt too, pressing her forehead to his chest. There was no heartbeat, just warmth fading. "He bought you your time," she said, voice breaking. "We got to make it mean something." Ilara touched the ash mark on her forehead. Then she dipped her fingers in the dark water and drew the same mark on Isaac's. "So you don't forget neither," she said through tears. The swamp held their grief in silence. Even the birds had gone still. Miriam rose slowly. "We go now, while they ride west. Follow the river east till it bends. There's a settlement beyond the line, folks who won't turn us in." Ilara and Ella didn't move. They kept their eyes on their father until the fog swallowed his shape. Miriam had to pull them away, whispering, "He's with Grace now. He done what he came for." They moved on, barefoot and blood-stained, slipping between trees like shadows that refused to die. Behind them, the marsh swallowed Isaac whole, leaving only ripples, circles widening, fading, then gone. By nightfall, they reached dry land again. The stars hung cold and bright overhead. Ilara looked up at them, her voice a whisper. "He said fear don't stop fire. You light it anyway." Miriam nodded. "Then keep it burning, child. You're all that's left to carry it." They walked until the ground turned firm and the air no longer smelled of smoke. But the ashes clung to them still on their skin, their clothes, their memories. They were no longer just daughters, they were witnesses, and that was something even fire couldn't erase. Dawn came grey and cold over the river basin, pulling mist across the fields like a burial shroud. The air smelled of damp earth and wood smoke. The swamp was behind them now, a crawling nightmare swallowed by fog, but its silence clung to the three figures walking the dirt road. Miriam led, a torn shawl around her shoulders, one hand clasped tight to Ella's. Ilara walked a step behind, her small face set with a steadiness far too old for her years. They had not eaten since the night before. The bag of cornmeal was gone, lost when Miriam slipped into the creek during their escape. Still, she walked with her head high, eyes flicking to the horizon. Each rise in the road could have meant salvation or a noose. "Keep close," she whispered, "and don't speak unless I do." Ilara nodded, clutching the broken doll she had carried since Fairview, its face half burned, one button eye missing. The doll had survived the fire. Somehow, that mattered. As the road curved east, the first sound of life reached them, the faint creak of wagon wheels, the bark of a dog. A small trading post sat ahead, no more than a cluster of cabins and a store with a faded sign reading Brooks and Sons Supply. Smoke rose from its chimney. Miriam stopped short, studying it. "If we're lucky, they won't know yet," she said quietly. "If not," Ilara finished for her, "we keep walking." They approached, slow, bare feet kicking dust. A man in a canvas apron stepped from the store, wiping his hands. His gaze fell on them, the two children and the dark-skinned woman with torn sleeves. For a heartbeat, nothing moved. "You lost?" he asked. Miriam forced her voice steady. "Traveling to the river town. Our kinfolk there." He eyed them, frowning. "Ain't safe country for wandering." Behind him, a newspaper nailed to the post fluttered in the wind. A headline caught her eye. "Fairview Plantation in flames. Slave rebellion suspected." Below it, a sketch rough but recognizable. A tall man with weary eyes and two young girls beside him. Miriam's throat tightened. "Come on, girls," she said quickly, pulling them past, but the man's eyes followed. "Hold up," he called. "You look mighty like—" Miriam didn't let him finish. She ran, dragging both girls by the hand. Behind them, the man shouted. A dog barked. Then two shots cracked through the still morning air. Dirt jumped near their feet. "Run!" she cried. They bolted down the road, skirts flying, bare feet slapping mud. The trading post shrank behind them, but the barking grew louder. The dog was closing fast. Ilara turned mid-stride, snatched a handful of gravel and hurled it. One stone struck the hound's snout. It yelped, skidding to a stop. "Good girl!" Miriam gasped, pulling her forward. They cut off the road into the trees, crashing through undergrowth until their lungs burned. Finally, Miriam collapsed against a fallen log. The girls dropped beside her, panting. "They know," Ella whispered. "Let 'em know," Miriam said between breaths. "Truth done walked out that fire with us." For a long while they rested. The forest hummed with cicadas, indifferent to their fear. Miriam unwrapped a strip of cloth from her arm and tore it into smaller pieces, handing them to the girls for their blistered feet. As the sun climbed high, they moved again, following the river by instinct. The current glimmered between trees wide and slow. On its far side lay Georgia, and beyond that, the rumor of safety. Some said there were people who helped hidden houses, secret signs on doors, but rumors could kill as easy as save. By dusk they found an old ferry landing, abandoned and half sunk. A rope still hung from a post, swaying gently in the evening wind. Miriam crouched beside it, testing the planks. "We can cross if the boards hold." Ilara stared at the dark water. "What if they don't?" Miriam smiled faintly. "Then we learn to float." They worked in silence. Miriam pried loose 2 barrels from the shore and lashed them under the ferry's base with vines. The girls fetched branches, weaving them tight. When finished, it looked crude, but strong enough. Before they boarded, Miriam knelt before the twins. "You remember what your father told you?" Ella nodded. "We light it anyway." "That's right," Miriam said softly. "This river's your fire now. Don't let it go out." They pushed off as the first stars appeared. The current caught them slow but sure. The shore slipped away behind them, a shadow of the world they'd burned. Halfway across, the river deepened. Water lapped over the edge. Miriam rowed with a plank, muscles straining. The girls bailed with their hands, laughing once through the fear. It was wild laughter, desperate, alive. Then came the sound again, hooves on the far bank, shouts carrying across the water. Torches flared in the dark. "They're here!" Ella cried. Miriam didn't look back. "Row, don't stop!" Bullets hissed through the air, plunking into the water. One torch landed close, sputtering before sinking. The ferry rocked violently. Ilara clutched the plank and screamed. Miriam reached for her, then the ferry struck a submerged log. It split with a groan. "Hold on!" The river swallowed them. Cold tore through the night. The girls surfaced together, coughing. Miriam was nowhere in sight. "Mom!" Ilara shouted. "Miriam!" A moment later, a hand broke the water. Miriam gasped, dragging herself toward them, pushing the girls toward a floating barrel. "Hold tight!" she yelled. "Kick! Kick toward the far side!" They kicked, arms trembling, water filling their mouths. Behind them, torches moved along the bank, but none dared follow into the dark current. The river's pull grew stronger, dragging them out of sight. By the time they reached the opposite bank, dawn was breaking again, soft light over the reeds. Miriam pulled the girls ashore, collapsing in the mud, chest heaving. They lay there in silence, half dead and half born anew. Finally, Ilara rolled onto her back, staring at the pale sky. "Did we make it?" Miriam smiled weakly. "We're breathing. That's enough." She helped them to their feet. The land before them looked no different: wild grass, trees, the promise of another road. But something inside the air felt changed, like the world had turned a fraction lighter. They walked until the sun rose high, until their shadows stretched long again. At a bend in the road, they came across an old church. Its doors were open, paint peeling. From within came the faint hum of a hymn. Miriam hesitated. Could be safe, could be not. Ilara squeezed her hand. "We'll find out." They stepped inside. A small congregation turned to look, tired faces, black and white both, dressed in plain clothes. The preacher paused mid-verse, eyes soft with something that wasn't suspicion. "Where you come from, child?" he asked gently. Miriam lowered her head. "From fire, sir." The man nodded slowly, as if he already knew. "Then you come the right way. Ain't nothing grows without fire first." He motioned them to sit. The twins slid into the pew, hands clasped, faces lit by a shaft of sunlight through the cracked window. Outside, the smoke of Fairview was gone at last. Only the smell of cotton lingered, faint and ghost-like, drifting away on the wind. Ilara turned to her sister and whispered, "Pa said the truth was worth more than cotton." Ella smiled faintly. "Then we're rich now." And for the first time in days, laughter, small, fragile, but real, echoed through the old wooden church. The year was 1897. The Fairview Plantation no longer existed, at least, not as the world remembered it. The grand house had collapsed decades earlier, its columns crumbled and swallowed by vines. Where once rows of white cotton shimmered under the Georgia sun, there were now open fields dotted with wildflowers and oak trees reclaiming the soil. The land, once soaked with sweat and cruelty, had gone quiet. In Philadelphia, far from those fields, Mary Johnson sat by a window overlooking a narrow brick street. The world outside was alive with the clatter of horse carriages and the laughter of children walking home from school. Her breathing had grown shallow in recent months. The doctor called it weak lungs, but Mary knew better. She was simply nearing the end of the long road she had been walking since Fairview burned. Her hands, though wrinkled and lined, still carried a quiet strength. They had once plucked cotton until the skin bled. They had held her sister's hand through swamps and dark woods. They had held fire itself. And now, they trembled only when she reached for the pages before her, the final chapter of her memoir. On the desk lay the worn blue headscarf that had belonged to her mother. She had carried it through every stage of her life, across rivers, through cities, across years of silence and survival. The fabric had faded, but the memory had not. She dipped her pen into ink and continued writing. Freedom is not the absence of chains, but the courage to live with the scars they leave behind. I have carried both. A soft knock came at the door. A young woman stepped inside, holding a folded letter. "Miss Mary, this came for you," she said gently. Mary smiled faintly. "Set it there, Ruth." The envelope bore an unfamiliar seal embossed with the image of a magnolia flower. She broke it open carefully, her eyes scanning the elegant handwriting. "Dear Mrs. Johnson, my name is Margaret Roberts. I am the granddaughter of Thomas Roberts of Fairview. In the attic of our home I found records your name, your mother's, and something else. A letter from my grandmother, hidden and never sent. She wrote of sorrow and wrongs never righted. I do not ask forgiveness, but I wish to honor what was taken. We have founded a school in Georgia for freed children. It bears the name Leah Roberts Academy. You may think little of such gestures, but I hope you will find peace knowing her name now teaches others to read. With deep respect, Margaret Roberts." Mary let the letter fall into her lap, her eyes blurred. For a moment, she saw the fields again, her mother's bent figure, the endless white rows, the fire rising. She had dreamed for years of retribution, but she had never imagined reconciliation. She whispered, "Celia's name, in light." Leah's voice came back to her then, faint and loving. "Don't carry hate too heavy, baby. It burns you first." Tears rolled down her cheeks. She closed her eyes and breathed, slow and shallow. "I'm trying, Ma," she said softly. "I'm trying." The room dimmed as the sun began to set. Ruth entered again, adjusting the curtains. "You should rest now," she said gently. Mary nodded. "Soon. I just need to finish this last part." Ruth hesitated, then smiled. "You always say that." When she left, Mary took up the pen once more. The candlelight flickered, illuminating the ink stains on her fingers. Her voice trembled as she spoke the words she wrote. "I once thought freedom was fire, the kind that destroys. But now I know it is the warmth that remains after everything is gone." The wind outside picked up, rattling the window pane. Mary could almost smell the old air of Georgia, hear the rustle of cotton fields. Her chest rose and fell one last time in rhythm with that distant memory, and then she set the pen down. Morning came quietly. Ruth entered with tea and found her by the window, the soft dawn light resting on her still face. The blue headscarf lay over her folded hands, the ink on the final page barely dry. Word spread quickly through the small community of freedmen and educators who had known her. At her funeral, there were no grand carriages, no polished tombstones, only voices singing in harmony beneath a maple tree. They buried her beside Leah, whose grave had been waiting patiently all these years. A simple stone marked the spot. Mary Johnson, she chose freedom. Sarah Roberts, she burned the cotton and lit the way. Years later, long after those who had known her were gone, a photographer visited what remained of Fairview. He captured a picture of children running through the open fields of Leah Roberts Academy. The soil had darkened with time, fertile and forgiving. In the distance, the faint outline of old foundations could still be seen, half swallowed by grass. When the photograph developed, the man swore he saw something strange, two figures standing by the edge of the field, hand in hand watching the children. He thought it must be a trick of light, or the wind moving through dust. But those who knew the story believed otherwise. They said the sisters had come home. A generation passed. The story of Fairview became legend, a whispered tale told in classrooms, printed in pamphlets, performed on stages. The Fire Daughters of Fairview, they called them. For some, it was a tale of vengeance. For others, a lesson in courage. But for those who read Mary's memoir, it was something quieter. The story of two girls who refused to let the world tell them what they were worth. In one passage, now displayed in the Academy Library, she had written, "We did not set fire to cotton alone. We set fire to silence." That winter, a storm swept across Georgia, tearing through the trees around the Academy. When the clouds cleared, The caretakers found that a single oak, the one planted over the site of the old mansion, had been struck by lightning. Its bark was split, smoke curling gently from within. But beneath the charred outer layer, green shoots had already begun to sprout. The children said it looked like the tree was still burning from the inside, and maybe, in a way, it was. Because some fires never die. They live in names spoken aloud. They live in stories remembered. They live in the courage of those who refuse to forget. The final scene fades, a field of wild cotton swaying under a gold horizon, free of overseers, untouched by chains. A slow pan toward two faint silhouettes standing in the wind, Celia, Sarah, and Leah, looking upon the land reborn, their faces calm, their fire eternal. If this story moved you, subscribe for more powerful historical slave stories told through raw emotion and truth. Comment your thoughts what part of Sarah and Leah's story struck you most. Share this with someone who believes that courage, even in darkness, can change everything. More stories like this are coming, each one a voice from the fire that refused to die.